Hey everybody, welcome back to Lead Therapy, and thank you so very much for taking time for tuning in to the video. 210 firearms are missing from the Philadelphia Sheriff's Office. So let's take a closer look at this story. I said at the beginning of the video that 210 firearms were missing from the Philadelphia Sheriff's Office. But what makes this story even more incredible, that there could be 2 to 3 times more firearms missing than originally reported. I've said in previous videos I like to go to more than one source when it comes to these stories. And I looked at least 4 different stories on this subject. And they all just mention the 200 or 210 firearms that are missing. But then when you look at the PDF file that was released by the Controller's Office that did this investigation, then we find out there could be another 400 firearms missing. This all stems from a confidential complaint in late 2019 claiming 15 long guns went missing from the Philadelphia Sheriff's Office. Turned out to be an even larger problem than investigators initially expected. More than 200 firearms disappeared from the inventory and armory of the Sheriff's Office between 1977 and 2015 under previous sheriffs, the City Controller's Office found in a year-long investigation. The missing weapons fall into 2 categories. Service firearms. At least 101 weapons consigned to the sheriff's deputies could not be accounted for in the office's armory. Confiscated weapons. 109 guns taken through a state law called the Protection from Abuse Act, or a PFA firearm, disappeared between 1977 and 2015. The Controller's Office report said the investigation was hindered by both physical disorganization of the armory and inventory and poor record keeping by the Sheriff's Office. The report also said the previous sheriff, Jewel Williams, was not helpful to investigators. Williams lost his bid for re-election in May 2019. Controller's Office staff experienced considerable pushback from the previous sheriff administration, including restricting access to the armory and preventing interviews with relevant staff. City Controller Rebecca Reinhardt also said investigators uncovered numerous deficiencies related to the overall handling and storage of service firearms and PFA weapons by the Sheriff's Office. Specifically, firearms were piled on the floor and haphazardly stored in various locations. Service firearms and PFA weapons were found commingled, and some weapons were stored still loaded. I said earlier in the video that there could be more firearms missing than the 210 that had been reported. And here's part of the PDF file that I found on the investigation. Investigators determined at least 101 service firearms were missing from the Sheriff's Office armory, and 66 of them were Rule 700 firearms, which are firearms that were awarded to the Sheriff's Office between 1977 and 1988. Those 66 firearms are still registered with the Sheriff's Office, but none were found in the Sheriff's Office's inventory. Now here's the part these so-called news reporters conveniently left out of their stories. In the news reports, they only talk about these 66 Rule 700 firearms, when there were actually 442 Rule 700 firearms awarded to the Sheriff's Office. That leaves another 372 firearms that are still unaccounted for. And the last sentence at the bottom there is no comprehensive documentation for Rule 700 firearms obtained between 1988 and the present. As such, the number of missing or unaccounted for Rule 700 firearms could be greater than 66 included in the inventory. I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions like I do. The first one is, why didn't the so-called news media report on the other 370-some firearms that are still missing? Why did the former sheriff give such a hard time to the investigators and hamper their investigation? Is it because he was involved in a lot of this? Where are all these missing firearms? Most likely you guys are thinking the same thing that I am thinking, that they're in police officers or former police officers' collections at home. And one of the big questions I have is, why hasn't there been a federal investigation in this case? It involves hundreds of missing firearms. Why isn't the ATF and or the FBI involved in this? It took a long time to research this story and go through that PDF file on the investigation. If you appreciate the time and effort I put into this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. We're getting closer and closer to 25,000 subscribers. Please let me know in the comments what you think about what happened in Philadelphia. And as always, I will see you in the next video.